So
Yeah. Well, this is Suburban Rebels broadcast with Ian MacKaye, Minor Threat, Fugazi, and a million other amazing bands.
well, a few other, but thanks.
Yeah. So what was like growing up for you in Glover Park in D.C.?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to answer the question because I never grew up anywhere else. I mean, I loved my neighborhood. I was really like a neighborhood kid, like a block kid at first. Like, you know, Beecher Street, the block of Beecher Street that was my block, and my people were on my block. And then that eventually, you know, I was a neighborhood kid, and then I think I started when I started skateboarding in the mid '70s. Actually, a little bit earlier, I was riding bikes, but we just started to understand there was other neighborhoods and other kids, and that was kind of interesting, just to go out and see these other kids. And then when we got to skateboarding, we actually discovered whole pockets of kids who were skateboarding in other areas, and it was really interesting. But I really had a deep I was devoted to my neighborhood, just because that's where I had, my entire life I had grown up there. And my dad and my sister, they were living. My dad died in August, but like right until he lived in that house for 61 years, and my sister's still in the house. So it's like and my brother and his family lived just around the corner. So I mean, Glover Park was an interesting neighborhood. It was when we moved there in 1962, it was largely, it was like a kind of a blue collar. A lot of the people who worked in the factories down on K Street here in Washington, back when there were factories on K Street. They were the people, they were like largely West Virginia kind of people, and it was just a really different world. And there was a lot of it was never a bad neighborhood, certainly, but there was a lot of roughneck kids, and I really, I felt, I was reading S.E. Hinton books when I was a kid, who, she wrote The Outsiders and Rumblefish and all that stuff, so I was a real 70s kid, I'll tell you that. And of course, everybody was, my friends were, people were all starting to experiment with drinking and drugs, even by the time they were, 11, 12 years old. So, and part of the reason I think I never got involved, I was like, who wants to do that so soon? Seems crazy, But I don't know. I mean, it's like I love the neighborhood, but I don't know. I'm sure other neighborhoods are also equally great. I imagine anywhere I would live, I would find a value in it, because I think that's sort of I see value in everything, I guess.
Right. And when you got into music, I know you were in the Hendrix and the Who, and what other?
Beatles, of course.
The Beatles, okay. And did you shoplift "Summertime Blues" by the Who?
That was my first record. Yeah, I shoplifted a 7-inch of "Summertime Blues." Yeah. From G.C. Murphy's dime store. It was. Yeah, I mean, the first record I really remember listening to, my parents had a Grundig kind of console turntable, and there was a guy named Floyd Kramer, and he had a song called "Last Date," and it's sort of a country, it's an instrumental, sort of country-esque, but kind of that sort of groovy country stuff. And my recollection is that when I was like maybe 4, 5, 6 years old, I would lie on the floor of my parents' dining room, in front of the Grundig with my head against the speaker and just play the song over and over. I was just obsessed with that song.
Oh, wow.
There's just certain musics, like my mom. There's a couple things my mom played on the piano. She could play she could read, she could sight play, and so she would take sheet music out and she'd play it, and it was really. I remember just being sort of electrified by some of the way the chords overlaid. And actually, I remember a really important moment for me musically was in kindergarten, and we were singing. We did "Home on the Range," and the teacher was teaching us the sort of the simple harmony, where there's two different groups of kids saying different things, and it really it blew my mind. Like just what happened when that harmony happened, when everyone sang together, it just was really affected me. So I think that I was actually talking to this class earlier today, and someone asked me about how I got into music, and I said the truth is that I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't play piano. I started playing probably when I was 3 or 4 years old, but I was never not a great piano player. I could play it though. I played by ear. I can't, I never could read. I still can't read. And I just loved. I can just sit down and pick out something that sounds good to me. That's all that mattered to me. I don't really care whether it's something that, someone else might say, like, that's not really a song. Okay. I don't give a fuck. There was one point, I did take some lessons from a woman who lived on our block, and she was just another mom, and she taught me what the keys were, like the name of all the keys and that stuff, and then maybe she gave me some really elementary reading, learning how to do like the right hand or whatever. And then my mom said, well, maybe you should go see an actual like music school guy. So I went to this guy at American University, and he's a very nice guy, Dr. Kidd. Very nice guy. But he, the first day I went there, we went into the little recital room, and he said, well, I hear you already play. And I said, yeah. He said, can you play me some of your songs? I had, I don't know, dozens of little pieces of music that I had written that I liked. So I played him a few things, and he said, well, that's really nice. He goes, it's not piano, but it's nice.
Yeah, nice.
And I was like, wow. I think that was the first moment in my life I realized that there was a formal piano versus what I was playing, like what I call upper and lowercase piano, like a formal form. So he was correct in as much that what I was playing was not piano by the sort of formal standards, but I absolutely was playing a fucking piano. So it's like, so there was like this weird moment for me, the real realization, and I liked him. As I said, he's a nice guy, but after a while, I disliked those classes so much that not only did I quit, but I quit playing piano.
Oh, okay.
And a number of years went by, maybe 2 or 3 years, and then I think I had sufficiently forgotten some of what had been impressed upon me in terms of the piano, and I just started playing on my own again. And that was really, so I was just back to where I wanted to be, which is just sitting down and finding things that just touched me or sounded interesting, and then just following that. Eventually, I tried to learn how to play guitar because Hendrix and Pete Townsend, all these people would play guitar, and I couldn't figure out how the piano would work on a stage if I wanted to jump around or smash it or something. And so I was trying to figure out, I got a piano, an old guitar from a garage sale, for like $10, and it was a piece of junk. And there was a kid in my neighborhood who was a tough guy, and my mom hired him to teach me guitar. She really hired him because she figured if the tough guy learned my name, he's sort of a bully guy, not a bad guy, but just sort of a roughneck, that he wouldn't bully me. And she was right. I ended up being friends with him until he died. But I couldn't. Do you play guitar?
No.
Okay, well, it's so weird. It's a discipline like anything else. But for instance, if you're like somebody who like you play soccer, it doesn't mean you can. Then you try to play hockey. It's really like it's similar, but it's so different that you can't. It's like you can't process it. And that's my experience with trying to learn how to play guitar. I could play piano, but I couldn't understand how the strings on the guitar related to the piano. And all we were able to really achieve is I learned how to play "Smoke on the Water" in one string. because I was I couldn't understand chords to save my life. And then I gave up on the idea of being in a band. I just became a skateboarder instead, which was great. I mean, I love skateboarding, and that's really where my social life, like a lot of ways, like that's where I met Henry and John Targadon, and we all skated together, and we became inseparable friends still to this day. And it's been 50 years since I met Henry, and we still are in touch constantly.
Yeah, that's great.
And so then, so I was, but I wasn't a great skateboarder. I loved it, but I wouldn't say I was a great skateboarder by any means. And eventually, we just got to, people in my school, at high school, started listening to punk, and I was really, like Henry and the rest of us, we just listened to Ted Nugent, like Double Live Gonzo. That was our shit. Double Live Gonzo and Led Zeppelin, Aerosmith, Parliament Funkadelic, anything heavy. It was like, and we that's what we wanted, like Gap Band or Lakeside or obviously the Who and early Stones, like just stuff that we thought was like heavy sounding. And so my friends in school they were getting into the Ramones and Iggy Pop and all this stuff, and we were just I was arguing with them about it, and then at some point someone said, "Have you actually listened to punk?" And I was like, "No, because it sucks, And then they lent me some records, and it was really the Sex Pistols record was the thing that blew my mind. It's close enough to rock and roll that I could make the connection. Because at first, none of it sounded like music to me. I couldn't make any sense out of it. Yeah. But then, suddenly I realized, oh, this is the shit. This is the stuff. This is what I can do. And the first show I saw, which was February 3rd, 1979, first punk show I saw was the Cramps.
Right.
And they play a lot of songs on one string. And I could play Smoke on the Water on one string. So I was like, this I can fucking do. I can do this. And we immediately we got to form a band. And it was just like that, And as soon as I got in, this, of course, in 1979 here in Washington, punk and skateboarding were kind of opposites. Like, later punk became really synonymous with skateboarding. Like skateboarders are all, but in the very beginning, at least around here, like the skateboarders just thought punks were stupid as shit.
Oh, really? Huh.
Oh, they hated them. And then the punks thought skateboarders were ridiculous. Yeah. So I had to kind of make a choice, Is it going to be the Sharks or the Jets? But I was like, but mostly the truth was I had actually kind of, with skateboarding, like, we started getting some parks around here. And, of course, when you have parks, you get locals. And locals, a lot of times, are dicks.
Yeah.
Just like, and I was, like, not really that into those people. So I actually kind of started to feel like, well, I think, like, I'm going to do punk. I kept skating, but I just stopped being down with all the, like, this. Not that I was ever down. Also, there were a lot of, they were really druggy. Like, the skaters were all just getting high and partying all the time. And it just wasn't my scene, so I felt really like, well, this seems like the right place for me to, because I felt like what punk was like a collection of freaks, and I felt like a freak. So then I was like, great, I'm going to do this. And that's what I did. And then, not long after that, I saw on the Skateboarder or something, that Steve Olson and Dwayne Peters and these guys had cut their hair, and Alba cut his hair, and mind-blowing. It was really exciting for me to realize that these guys were like, they were having a similar kind of journey.
Right. Yeah. Do you remember your first skateboard, what it was?
The first skateboard I ever owned was called, not counting, I think I probably had a Shark in the late 60s or early 70s, which is a wooden board with composite wheels and loose ball bearings.
Oh, okay.
I don't remember. But the first skateboard I remember it was a thing called a Rolling Star. It was a plastic board. It was a piece of junk. It was a plastic board that had urethane wheels but loose ball bearings. And it's very small with a little kick tail. And and I got it, and we would ride. We did a thing called catamaran. You ever heard catamaran?
Sounds familiar.
Catamaran is if you have two people and two boards, and you both sit on the board facing each other.
Oh, okay.
And then one person puts their legs on the outside. You kind of intertwine your legs, and you hold your arms.
Yeah.
You hold your arms so you're facing each other, and then so you both lean one way or the other. You can turn the skateboards. We would just go down these hills catamaraning. And we also had we had a thing we did called dog fighting, where you both start at the top of the hill and just try to knock the other person off their board. That was the early stuff. And then we started getting more serious about skateboarding. That's when we first heard about Skateboarder magazine and all that. And Rollins was the person that kind of clued a lot of us in, because he was really ahead of he just knew about stuff before we did. Yeah. And when we saw Skateboarder, it was really exciting. And then we started seeing all these boards, like and Roadrunner wheels and all this stuff. And then immediately, then we had this whole thing. I think my first board might have been a Sims deck with Road Rider 4s and on trackers. But God, who knows at this point. I've had a lot of boards. Yeah. Yeah.
Did the Bad Brains influence you to start the Slinkies and then Teen Idols?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Slinkies were almost immediately after seeing the Cramps. Now, the Cramps show was my first punk show, and the Bad Brains were in attendance. They weren't playing, but these guys were all there. They're walking around, and they look so fucking cool. I'm like, who are those guys? And someone goes like, well, that's a band called the Bad Brains. They're from here. And we used to walk around Georgetown, which was sort of like it was a strip back then. Like everyone would just go hang out. And there's all the Bad Brains had put posters up that just said, "Are you ready? We are." And there would just be no gig, just a poster about them saying, "Are you ready? We are," and have a picture of them looking so cool. Huh. And we're like, who are these fucking guys? And then some kid in my high school was talking about him. He was kind of a hippie kid that lived in this kind of a commune place called Madame Zorgan, and he was talking about how great they were. And then in June of '79, the Damned came to Washington to play at this club called the Bayou, which was actually it was an 18 and up club. At that time in Washington, you could drink beer and wine if you're 18, and you had to be 21 to drink harder liquor. So the cutoff, it wasn't all ages. You had to be 18 to get in. I was 17, so we made a fake ID, and a friend of mine worked for the Naval Sea Cadet, and he stole a bunch of blanks from his commander's desk or something, and I bought one for $10. And then the day of the show, me and Henry used my mom's Polaroid and took a photo of me against a sheet standing at what I thought was attention, and then just did a shitty lamination job on this thing. So we went down to the venue. We were in line to get in, and the first guard was like, "Yo, this is not a real ID." No. And I said, "I'm sorry. You're not accepting a U.S. military ID?" And they looked at the other guy, and the other guy shrugged, and they're like, "Okay, go ahead." Boy, am I glad, because the Bad Brains were opening. That's the first time I saw them. Bad Brains and the Dam, June '79. And it was a life-changing gig, because I'd seen the Bad Brains around. I'd heard so much. They had played a couple of shows, but man, that show, that was just blew everybody's mind. They were the greatest band. And so, of course, they were hugely inspirational in terms of wanting to play music. And, as we got to know them, we became, quite good friends with them over the next year. And, Henry used to run errands. We used to run errands with those guys. He didn't have cars, so we'd pick them up and go places with them. Or, we helped, actually, Henry helped press our first record. He helped lend them money and went to New York, I think. He might have gone to New York to pick up the record. I don't remember. Some other. So we were really, we did a lot of stuff with them, and HR was brilliant and had a lot of great ideas. So they were hugely influential. And one of the things about them that was really influential for me was in June of 1980. January 1980. I got a call from HR, and they were supposed to go to England to open for the Damned, but they got held up at Heathrow and sent back. They weren't admitted into the country. And when they got back, they were, obviously pretty bummed, but they also had lost all their gear. Someone had apparently stolen it. So he called me and he said, "Hey, we're in a jam. We're going to come back to Washington and we need to play a gig and raise some money. Would you be up for playing with us, like doing a benefit, the Teen Idols?" And we'd only played like a couple of shows at that point. We're like, "Of course." And so they're going to do it at this commune, that place in Adams, Oregon. It was like a venue. And we're like, "Of course." He says, "And it's okay if we use your gear. We don't have any gear." And I was like, "Our gear sucks, but you're certainly welcome to use it." He's okay. And then he's like, "Is it cool if we practice with you? Can we practice at your space?" And we're like, "Well, we practice at Nathan's mom's house after school. Yeah. I guess, if you want to come with us, meet us at school. We're going to Wilson High School." So they showed up at Wilson High, and we all, 8 of us, took the bus down the hill, down to MacArthur Boulevard, and went to Nathan's house. And we practiced first, and they sat on the couch while we were practicing, and I was nervous as fuck. And just playing and just thinking, "Oh, this bass sucks, and this amp sucks," but just really pushing through. And they were like, "Oh, cool, man." And then they practiced, and I was like, "Oh yeah, not the bass, not the amp,"
right?
Because they were phenomenal. And watching them practice, watching the kind of work ethic they had, the way they wrote, the way they thought about things, the way they talked, it was just mind-blowing. And I think it really impressed upon me how serious it was to practice. And all the bands I've ever been ever since, we just practiced, especially the bands that really went somewhere. Like, we just practiced like hell. Yeah. Like, just play music as much as possible. Fugazi would practice 5 days a week, sometimes 4 or 5 hours a day.
Oh, wow.
Now, it doesn't mean we were always playing all the time, but we were together, just talking or, maybe sitting and discussing something, but then working on the song and just keep, it was something that we took really seriously. So the Bad Brains had a massive influential impact on us. Same with Black Flag. Black Flag was the same way. Henry would tell me about their practices, and we're like, "Oh, got to practice, got to keep it going."
Right. And what that Saturday Night Live Fear show, was that like one of your earlier shows you attended?
No, that was October 31st, 1981. I had been going to gigs for 2 years at that point.
Okay, 2 years. All right.
Yeah. No. I mean, in fact, the reason we were invited was because Penelope Spears, who did Decline of Western Civilization, she had a screening here in Washington at the AFI, which was at that time located at the Kennedy Center. And we all were excited to see it. We'd certainly heard about the movie because we read Flipside, and we were all completely in love with LA punk stuff. So we went down to see it. It was showing 2 nights, I think, and we ended up seeing both nights. And we hung out with Penelope after the show, after the first night, and just hung out with her and had a great time. And then we went to see the next night. It was just great. And then she was friends with Belushi, and Belushi had been at that point was no longer on Saturday Night Live. But I guess they had contacted him about doing a cameo, and he said he would do a cameo if they would book Fear as the musical guest for his Halloween night. And so it seemed a lot. So they're like, okay. And he said, but also I want to bring some real punks to the. I want some real punks there. I don't want to have I want to have people dancing because you have to understand what punk music is. It's about the band and the audience. Yeah. And so he talked to Penelope. She was friends with him, and she's like, "Oh, you need to talk. I need real punks. You got to talk to these kids in Washington because they're real. They're real. They're for real kids, and they're punks." And so actually, I was called on the phone by Lauren Michaels, and then he put Belushi on the phone, and Belushi was like, "I just want to have some real punks." I was like, "Okay, we'll come up for that." And they said, "Okay, just come to 30 Rock and just go to the Garden. The password will be Ian MacKaye." So a bunch of us had drove up to New York. It wasn't the first time. We've been up to shows in New York a few times. We'd gone up there. So we all drove up there, and we went the day before because the Misfits and the Necros were playing at this Ukrainian hall down on 2nd Ave, I think it was. And we went down. We went to go see that show, had a blast. And then we saw all the Midwestern people were there, so we're like, "Yo, just come to the gig and just the password is Ian MacKaye." And then we saw our New York friends, like we saw, just come to the gig and say the password's Ian MacKaye. So by the time the show, there was like 40 of us, and it was ridiculous, really. It was just like, but yeah, it was a funny night, but it's certainly not. No, that was I was long in the tooth at that point. I mean, Minor Threat had already played. We played from December until September, and then we broke up because Lyle went to college.
Mm.
So we'd already done a little tour, and we'd played all these shows, and I'd seen probably 100 gigs at that point.
Oh, okay, all right. Now, who came up with the band name Minor Threat?
Let me think. There's a way I can. I think Jeff and I once figured out that the person who did whoever did the logo is the other person came up with the name. So I think Minor Threat. I think he came up with the name, and I came up with the logo. And then Discord, I came up with the name, and he came up with the logo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But Jeff and I, when the Teen Idols broke up, like Jordy, the guitar player, said he wanted to quit. After we got back, we did this crazy trip to California. We took a Greyhound bus to California and did two shows, one in L.A. and one in San Francisco. We made $26, and it was really funny. But Jordy was going into 12th grade and think he was done, so he quit. And I actually, at that point, I was playing bass in the Teen Idols, and I really wanted to sing because I was writing a lot of the lyrics, and I knew in my mind how I wanted them to sound. And Nathan, who's a great singer, just didn't sing them the way I was hearing them. So, I really wanted to sing, and I was super influenced by Janis Joplin and Joe Cocker and just people who really put it on the stage, like let it out. And so when Jordy quit, Jeff and I told Nathan, like, yeah, we're gonna break up the band. We're not gonna get another guitar player because I'm gonna start singing now. And Jeff and I took a drive up to go see an old friend of ours, Mark Sullivan, who sang for our first band, the Slinkies, and he's still a dear friend of mine. I see him every Sunday. And but we took this long all-night drive with just like a case of soda and a bunch of fucking Doritos or Fritos or Bugles or one of those things, and we just drove all night up to upstate New York to go see Mark and then see the other friends over in Massachusetts, but the whole time just discussing band names. And actually, one of the band names we were thinking about was Straight Edge, but then we decided against it because at that time, if you ever went to a record store, in those early days, you go to the S Assorted section was always huge. So I was like, don't have a band that starts with the letter S, So, but anyway, but also Minor Threat just seemed like the cooler. It kind of like Teen Idols, Minor Threat. It just seemed like a really nice sort of connection.
Yeah.
And so we picked that name.
Okay. And how chaotic were those early shows for you?
Minor Threat?
Yeah.
Well, the early shows were this local, and they're pretty cool. Yeah, they were good. I mean, things got crazier by that summer of '81. That's when things really started. I mean, our early shows we were all friends, so just sort of we were playing, and yeah, I would say they were pretty wild. The first show we played was at a house show in this neighborhood called Adams Morgan, and it was the Bad Brains, some reggae band, Black Market Baby, SOA's first show, Minor Threat's first show, and the Untouchables. It was a great night, and it was but it was just basically a party with like maybe 40 people. Again, raising money because the Bad Brains had borrowed a bass amp from the guys from Black Market Baby, and someone stole it, so we had to raise money to buy them, replace the SVT cabinet that got stolen. And then after that, the shows, we were a small band, so they would start out, but I would say by the summer of '81, it got really intense. Like we went out and played some shows in the Midwest. We were trying to make it all the way across the country. We were touring in a '70 Plymouth Duster, like a 1979 Volvo wagon, and then the guitar player from the DC Youth Brigades had borrowed his parents' sort of camper van, And so the Youth Brigade and Minor Threat were going to do this trip all the way across the country, and we brought like 8 kids with us, like friends. My brother was with us, and all these like 14 and 15-year-old kids, and we made it as far as Madison, Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that the guitar player's parents called and said, "Wait, whoa, what's going on here?" So they had to go back with the van. So then we were just stuck in the Midwest with just, the Minor Threat guys. And we did one show in Windsor, Ontario, right across from Detroit. And it was pumped up, man. It was those shows got, and then by the time we made it back, in the summer of '81, we did a show at the 930, and it was huge. And it was just suddenly like, oh shit. Things were like, it just got, really, pop bands we were suddenly doing like hundreds of people. And then Lyle went off to college, and so we broke up, which was sort of the pro forma. And then Jeff and I were working on the Grand Union / Skewbald project. That was supposed to be a band, but we never even played a show. We just did this recording that we ended up releasing many years later. But in the December of '81, the Bad Brains had been on tour. They went out west during that in that fall or early winter. And I was at a Bad Brains show at the 930 Club, and I saw HR, and he said, "Oh man," he goes, "Man, Minor Threat, you got to go play in California, man." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Like, you got to go play, man. You guys." Said you asked a question and people want answers now. Like people were talking about you out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, we broke up. And he's like, well, then you should reform. And then I saw Lyle, who was home from school. He was going to Northwestern. And I said, yo, HR thinks we should reform. And Lyle said, I hate school. So he came back at Easter, and we started playing. And from that point on, it was really, things were it was pumped up. Every show huge. And then we went out to the West Coast. Our first show in L.A. was Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat, MDC, and Zero Boys. And I can't remember the first. A local band was playing too, and it was like 2,000 people there. It was insane. Those shows were just wild.
Would you think that was probably the wildest one, where you're like, this is crazy?
That was pretty wild. That one, yeah. There was some other. But we did a show the next year. That was also up in Chatsworth, the Roller Works, and that was pretty berserk. And we did a show. I remember playing a show in '83 in Madison Square Garden in Phoenix. It was this boxing. It was like a wrestling ring place. It was like a cage match joint. It was like you played on the boxing ring, but it was surrounded by chain link fence up to the ceiling. And the kids there were so out of their fucking minds. They're just climbing up the chain link fence and jumping off into the crowd, and and also the other shows were weird because you play and some people would just attack you. Like I got attacked, and all these different people just jump on stage and just get into it with me and tear my shirt off or try to tackle me or try to punch me out, or it was It was very combative at that time. That was the thing about a lot of those shows. It was it was something new, and birth is attended by friction, and so there was people had all kinds of ways of interpreting what is supposed to be going on, and quite often it could be a little uncomfortable, but that was part of the beauty of it,
So you had to fight all the time back then.
There was definitely some fighting going on, yes, for sure, because kids were just, I think people were very regional. So if you come into their town, and especially because our reputation had preceded us as straight edge thing. So there was like this, everywhere we go, not everywhere, many places we go, there were kids who would come to us and say they were part of the round edge movement or this bent edge movement or whatever, which was, I didn't even acknowledge, wasn't even interested in the straight edge movement. So suddenly being faced with all these counter movements seemed berserk to me. But those guys, they were out because it was kind of gangy. People were ganged up a little bit, and also a lot of people were fucked up, drunk. I remember we did a show in Dallas, and this guy ran on stage. It was not much of a stage; it was a low stage. And he ran up and he ripped my shirt off, and that would be like my third shirt that had been ripped off on the tour already. And I was so mad, so I chased him into the audience, and I grabbed him and I turned him around and I ripped his shirt off. and then I dropped down on my knees, and I was trying to rip his pants in half, trying to grab him. And at that moment, the police came running in, and there was like this big circle of kids. In the middle of the kids, there's a shirtless guy in tattered shirt, another guy on his knees trying to pull his pants down. It was hilarious. Yeah, it was a really funny night.
Was that probably the worst Minor Threat show, or?
Oh no. Oh, there were so many bad. I mean, you mean bad, worse? What do you mean by worst?
I guess like where you were like, oh, why am I doing this?
No, I don't think I ever felt that way. I always knew why I was doing it.
Oh, okay.
Because I fucking meant it. I was there.
Yeah.
There was never any question about that.
Yeah.
There were times in Fugazi where things got so dangerous. I was like, this seems not good for people. Not me. Not worried about me. Worried about the audience. But there was we had a lot of trouble with skinhead kids later on, and that was not cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's never fun. Like, people often said that, you guys are like cops. You're always telling people not to stage dive and all that. And I said, but what people don't understand is that if you're in a band and you're playing a show and people who love your band come to see your band, and the people who love your band come see your band and stand in the front row through all the opening acts that are excited to see you, and then when you start playing and someone does a stage dive and lands on the neck of the person in the front and breaks their neck and they don't walk again, that's unbearable.
Yeah.
And it happened. So, from my point of view, like the people, when we play shows, like I'm not into people getting hurt by other people, especially when it was not even, it had apropos of nothing. It was just ritual behavior. Like it was nothing, ritualized behavior. It wasn't like they were stage diving because they couldn't control themselves. It was because they were at a punk gig and they thought that's what you're supposed to do. And I think that was really, and I certainly jumped off stages. I'm not mad about that. It's just that, but the setting of Fugazi was not the same. When you have a barricade, it's really different. And people are in the front row of the barricade with their heads hanging over it. It's a bummer, So, or if you had a barbecue and some guys came charging in and stabbed somebody, I think you'd probably feel pretty bad about it, right?
Yeah, sure.
So how do you think I felt? Like you play music and then people get beat up or stabbed. That ain't good.
Yeah.
So fuck that. So I don't. So call me a cop. I don't give a fuck. I'm not having that.
Yeah. And did you guys play with Black Flag a lot out on the West Coast?
No. I played with Black Flag once in D.C. We played with Black Flag once in Long Island at a club called My Father's Place. We played with Black Flag. We did a show in San Pedro at a place called Dancing Waters. We were playing with Circle One, John Messias' band. Mm-hmm. Circle One and Dr. No and maybe Youthbury. I don't remember who the other band. There's some other band, but then Black Flag jumped up and did a set. They played before we did, and I think that's the last time we played with them. I don't think we played with them. Now, I roadied for them in England in 1981, so I was with them for quite a few shows.
Okay.
Yeah.
How was that, roadieing for Black?
That was insane. Because it was England in 1981. It was like the worst winter on record. We were supposed to open for the Exploited, and Waddy hurt his ankle and canceled the tour.
Oh, wow.
So then we had no gigs. We were completely broke.
And
we were desperate. We were just desperate for, so they were getting these gigs, and then the British punk kids at that time were not into American punk, and were out to make, and that was a fucking battle, and that was crazy. A lot of spitting going on.
Oh, yeah.
And they kept calling it, because Black Flag was from L.A., and all these, the way the British people were thinking L.A. was just like, Beach Boys and surfboards and stuff, and their concept of what L.A. was so wrong, and then their concept, so they couldn't understand how someone could call themselves punks coming from such, like a cotton candy town. But it's not a cotton candy town. Anyone, if you live there, it's harsh and in some ways way more hardcore than some of the provincial kind of British places we were playing. But I remember we did a gig in this town called Preston, which was a little tough as nails little town, and we played to, I don't know, 30 or 40 people, and there was a bunch of skinhead guys there, and they were on the stage, standing at this very low stage, and they were standing on the stage with their girlfriends, and Chuck, Dukowski jumped, he plays hard, and he jumps around, and he bumped into one of the girlfriends, and the one of the skinhead guys, like, took a shot at Chuck, and I was on that side of the stage, so I got in front of the guy, and I was like, man, you better get the fuck off stage. And then he kind of looked at me, and he took a shot at me. And then suddenly it was like me and Henry and Mug are just going on. It was like a huge fight suddenly, like a big. And the skinhead guys, I think, were unprepared for that. And they retreated to the back of the room, and Henry got on the mic, and he said, oh, yeah. He goes, back where we come from, we like to do that all night long. Let's go. So then they went outside and snapped the mirrors off, and spray painted the van, fucked up the van or the truck we were traveling in. And but it was that was an incredible experience. Most expensive. I mean, it cost me so much money. I had to pay for my own plane ticket, and they were so broke that they took money from me to buy groceries. And this is true. Every day, like, we were basically given, each band member was, Chuck and Greg were the bosses. We would get, see, I have this right. I think it was an apple, 2 bread rolls, and a hunk of cheese.
Oh, wow.
That's what we got. That was our food every day.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. That was harsh.
And what, do you think that was probably one of the most violent times out there? Like, that you played? I mean, you eventually were sick of the violence.
Of course, yeah. Because it was absolutely pointless. I don't know. It was weird to me. It was. I have to say that the violence that you're talking about in that kind of context, it was. I won't say it was sport, but it wasn't that far removed from it. So in other words, it's like. It was like a sport. It was like an event that the players were all equally informed about what was happening.
Right.
So it wasn't like suddenly like someone being beaten up because they were just standing there. It was like literally the people, that's just Black Flag. Those shows were so chaotic, and Henry's, he was so demonstrative, and the music made people go so crazy.
Right.
So it was just it was very tense. But everyone were participants. They weren't there. They knew what was up. Now later, I think the violence, in my mind, I started seeing violence in the, say, 83, 84, somewhere around there, where it was just like more ganged up, and people were just getting targeted and sort of beaten up for really absurd reasons. Like people were stealing people's Doc Marten boots, or they were wearing red shoelaces, which signify socialism, or whatever. It was like this weird,
right,
fundamentalist kind of violence. Which, like, my point of view in terms of violence was, I had developed on my own. Like, I identified as a pacifist starting as a child, and even when I was a punk, I was like, I'm a pacifist, but I will fight, because I'm not scared to fight, I had this theory, as a concept, a philosophy, I should say, which was that I bruised the ego and not the body. And what that meant was that if someone attacked us, I would step to that person,
right,
and I would fight him, but I would never send someone to a hospital. That was not my thing. I wasn't even, like, there was no rage. It was just fearlessness, really. Like, that's how I looked at it. And like, someone's got to step up to these people. And so it was a defensive mechanism. It was like a defensive posture, I felt, that we were being attacked. When early punk in America, the media picked up on it, and they made these depictions of punks as sort of lunatic, homicidal maniacs,
Right.
drunken, drug-addled, crazy people, which was not accurate at all. And as problematic as it was that people would think of us as that, straight people or people who are not in the scene, a bigger problem was that sort of lunatic, homicidal maniacs thought they were punks. So they started coming to shows.
Right.
So they were unhinged or fucked up or in their minds, and they started coming to gigs, and suddenly they were attacking from within. It wasn't like before we were defending ourselves from without, like all the people driving by and yelling and jumping out of the car and chasing you, all that kind of stuff, where you have to fight back. But now people are at the shows, and so the violence started to kind of infect the actual shows, and then you have like this weirder later era where people are just fighting for no sensible reason, no defense. It's just really they're targeting and setting upon people, and I remember talking to some of those kids and saying, like, what are you doing? They said, we're just doing what you did. And I realized, yo, man, violence begets violence. Like maybe I had a philosophy, and maybe that philosophy held some water, but ultimately it was a conceit. Because even if I was able to really only bruise the ego and not the body, the people around me weren't doing that. And certainly people who saw it when they were kids growing up, they just thought, oh, fight. And that's when I realized, fuck that. I'm done with violence forever.
Yeah. And how did you have so much energy on stage?
I don't know. The music.
Yeah. Did you get a lot of like backlash from haters when you started Straight Edge?
Well, Straight Edge was a song. I didn't start it. It wasn't a movement for me.
When you wrote it.
I wrote the song. I mean, there were a lot of people who were super into it. They were psyched because they also, in their own lives, it made sense to them. And then there was pushback. There was some people who were like, really like, you're a fundamentalist or you're fascist or whatever. And I like, which was weird because from my point of view, like I mean, really, the point of the song was really about my right to be straight because I was being ridiculed and taunted for being like straight in a world that was druggy, right? So in high school, most of my friends drank and so I was teased a lot. So I was writing songs like the Teen Idols wrote the song "Milk and Coke," which is sort of the similar kind of concept. Saying because making fun of all my friends who drank beer. So I said, I drink milk. I drink milk. I drink milk every day. I drink milk for the vitamin A. I drink Coke. I drink Coke. I don't care what people say. Whatever Coke. Anyway, so that was the point of. It was sort of lighthearted, but then I think things started to kind of heat up a little bit because people did get more. They were like, when we got into the punk scene, a lot of the punks were really oddly. I thought they'd appreciate our freakiness because we didn't. We were the weirdos because we didn't get high and we were punks. But in fact, it was really. Like people were threatened by it, so we started getting grief about it. We started getting, some punks were like, what the fuck are you guys? Are you Christians or what? That kind of thing. And so, and if you listen on the Out of Step record, we actually redid the song Out of Step specifically to say this is not a set of rules, because really the song is about a person's right to decide how he or she wants to live, what they want to do with their own lives. So you can see why that would be not, that would be the opposite of a movement, right? Because it was against peer pressure.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'd say there's some pushback.
Yeah. So, and mostly all your lyrics were pretty much inspired by like what angered you, right, or stuff around you.
Stuff, yeah, of course.
Yeah, the usual. What about Stepping Stone by the Monkees? Why did you choose that cover?
We didn't know it was by the Monkees.
Oh, okay.
And we thought it was by the Sex Pistols because it was on the Rock and Roll Swindle. We go, what a cool song. And then so that's how I knew it. And then somebody said, that's the Monkees. And we're like, oh my God, that's so cool. So Teen Idols, we all did it. Teen Idols did it. Untouchables did it. Then the X-Torts did it. And the X-Torts were basically SOA with Lyle singing.
Mm-hmm.
So then they broke up, and Lyle started playing guitar with us, so Minor Threat did it. And then Henry started singing for the X-Torts and became SOA, and they did it. And GIs did it. Everyone did. It was just fun. Everyone did the song. It was a great, really enjoyable.
Yeah. And what inspired you to form Fugazi in '86?
Well, I was in Embrace in '85.
Oh, okay.
So Minor Threat broke up in 1983, and then we were all trying to form bands, and I ended up being in a band called Embrace with some friends. But those guys had already been in the band. They were basically the Faith, my brother's band, with me singing, and they had already broken up once. So getting back together with this, have me singing, it just didn't work out. We only played about 10 shows, and it just didn't work out. It was not a good situation. And then after that, in '86, we broke up in '86, and I thought, my mistake was that I was trying to form a band. What I really wanted to do was play music. So I met Joe Lally. Well, I kind of knew him around the way, but we started talking, and I asked him if he wanted to play music with me. And he said, sure. I said, I'm not forming a band. I just want to play music. And he said, yeah. So we started playing music, and then Colin Sears, who was the drummer of Dag Nasty, who had just broken up, and who's a friend of mine. I said to Colin, hey, do you want to play music with me? I'm not forming a band, just playing music. And he said, sure. So we played for like 4 months together, and then Dag Nasty reformed, and Colin left us. And then I asked Brendan, who was practicing with a band called Happy Go Licky, I guess, at Discord House. I asked Brendan if he wanted to sit in. I said, I'm not forming a band, just playing music. And he said, sure. So we played together. And then finally, after Brendan actually left for a while, and we had other people come and play drums, it was the whole time I kept saying, just playing music. And then finally, in August of 1987, a year later, I said, should we be a band? And Brendan and Joe said, yeah. So we played our first show September 3rd, '87, and we had Guy. We asked Guy to be in the band, but he didn't want to be in the band, so he was just roadieing for us. And we kept trying to get him to do backing vocals and stuff. And then when he did one song, it was kind of an open. The idea was at the time, early Fugazi was going to be like a open membership. Have different people be in the band and playing trumpet or organ or just doing whatever. That was one of the original ideas. But so Guy sang a song with us, and then at some point we're like, just be in the band. So he joined the band, and then it was just from that point on. But mostly, that was the idea. I want to be in a band with my friends.
Right.
And that's my family.
Yeah.
The four of us are still in regular touch, and we're still in a band with each other as far as we're concerned.
Well, why was the band named Fugazi?
We needed a name to not be called Ian's new band. So we had to come up with a title, and I was reading a book called Nam by this guy, Mark Baker. It's an oral history from veterans and other people involved with the Vietnam War. And there's a lot of slang in there, and there's a glossary in the back. And I came across the word Fugazi, and I looked in the back, and the glossary, the definition said, a fucked up situation. I was like, wow, boom. Use that as the title of this band so I don't call it Ian's new band. And then years later, almost 10 years later, I was in Singapore. We were playing a show in Singapore, and after the show, I was talking to these kids, his brother and sister. They were teenagers, and the younger kid, the 15-year-old boy, said, "So what did Fugazi stand for?" And I was getting ready to tell him about this book, and then the girl, who was 17 or 18 years old, said, "Oh, it's an acronym: fucked up, got ambushed, zipped in."
Oh.
And I was like, wow, because I always figured it was an acronym because there was snafu, situation normal, all fucked up, fubar, fucked up beyond all recognition. So Fugazi, it just seemed like fucked up was in there, but I couldn't figure the acronym. And I don't know where she heard about it, but when she said that, it was 1996. I was blown away.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Hey, I got to jump off pretty soon. You're going to have a hell of a time transcribing. Do you have any other?
Well, right now you're doing Koriki, right? Is that your sole focus right now?
Well, Koriki, Joe and Amy and I practiced together for years. Same way, just playing music, not being in a band.
Yeah.
And then I it was like 4 years, and then in 2019 we decided, why don't we do a few shows? So we did a couple of shows. And then 2020, the very beginning of the year, we did like 9 shows, and it was going great. And then COVID.
Oh yeah.
And we had made a record. It was coming out it was supposed to come out. The release date for the record was March 26th, which was, right when everything shut down. So I delayed it till the summer because I wanted to make sure stores. I didn't want to just fuck up stores, and I knew everyone was gonna be closed. But we continued to practice, and we practiced right through the lockdown. We even did a little more recording. But then last summer, 2022, we were sort of stuck on these songs. We hadn't done any show. We hadn't played at all. And I thought, I'm out of ideas right now. So I said, I'm going to take a break. But I mean, Amy's my wife, so I see her pretty regularly. And Joe, we're dear friends. And so it's all good. Everything is good. But we haven't played in a while. We may return to that at some point. I have to kind of crack. I've been so busy with a number of things. Obviously, I think I mentioned earlier, my dad died in August. So my dad he's 89. So I was doing a lot of work for him. And, and so there's a lot of, I've just got a lot going on. And Discord is super busy. And so I just haven't, and also Amy and I have a 15-year-old kid. So just things were not lining up. But I've been playing guitar pretty regularly, and I'm starting to figure out why. I'm trying to figure out how to write songs really, like get back to that, to get my mind around the idea of, I can write a guitar riff in a heartbeat, but the words, that's hard right now.
Yeah.
And when I figure that out, that's when we'll return to the stage.
Will we ever see a Minor Threat reunion?
No.
Fugazi?
Who knows?
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
I mean, that one I don't know. Fugazi never broke up. Minor Threat decidedly broke up. I love those guys. I'll be seeing Brian in a couple of days. I'm super. They're my friends, and but we'll never play a show. But Fugazi never broke up, and we were together for 15 years, playing music for 15 years, and I don't know. There's no plan to, and the logistics of it would be so insane. I don't know how it would work. We don't we do all ages shows, low door price. Like, how do you do a low door price now?
Yeah.
How do you do it so the scalpers don't go lose their fucking minds?
Yeah, you can now. Right.
So this is really complicated, and you have Live Nation and these companies, everything just locked everything down. The landscape is very different. So I don't know. I think about it from time to time just because I think it's interesting. It's like a sort of a recreation for me to try to think of how we could navigate it. Yeah. But the truth is, Guy lives in New York, and the four of us have to be in the same place at the same time to really get there. And if Joe and Brendan and I are here still, and we see each other. But if all four of us are here and we decide to get together and we want to play some music, maybe we would. I don't know, but it's nothing. It doesn't matter either way.
Yeah. And how does it feel to have created like hardcore and straight edge movement, and what does it mean to you, hardcore?
Well, I'm a punk, so for me, I was hardcore punk.
Hardcore punk. Right?
Yeah, that's where the word hardcore came from for me. And the idea was there was new wave, which was like B-52s and Devo and goofy college stuff, right? And then there was punk rock, which was sort of Sid Vicious and sort of a certain fashion component and self-destructive nihilistic behavior, which I was not about. And I really like the idea of being a hardcore punk, meaning we didn't have to wear punk clothes. We just wore whatever we wore. Our street clothes is what we wear, we're punk. We're just punk, and that's what a hardcore punk was. So then Minor Threat, which I think was probably, it's arguably like the kind of one of the forming, like what became hardcore. Really, I think came from largely from Minor Threat. I think Circle Jerks and Minor Threat and maybe Black Flag, but it was that was the form of that kind of style in 7 seconds, of course. And
Yeah.
Necros and SSD Control, these bands, but we were all peers, and those are the, but that form, that kind of stripped down countercultural, form, that was something that, I thought was really important, because kids were forming bands and putting out their own records and putting out their own zines and creating an underground community that to this day still exists. Now later on, I think the problem with the concept of movements is that movements, they're like what makes a movement, what defines a movement, and then people start figuring out how to commodify it. And I don't give a fuck about that stuff. I'm not interested in selling like T-shirts and that's not my world. So, or like, you can't. If you're hardcore, you got to wear this or do that. Fuck that. Fuck all that. So I'm not a movement guy. So in the straight edge movement, I'm not a part of that movement. I coined the phrase, but in terms of it, I don't recognize it as a movement. I recognize it as people who have done some thinking in their lives, and just made some decisions. Now, I understand that there are some people who identify as or with straight edge or as a movement that have been aggressive or fundamentalist. And, I think that people have actually been killed. They've killed other people over this stuff. Like there's gangs that kill people over the, their straight edge, whatever their rules are. And for those people, they're not really, sobriety was not really what was their issue. Their issue was power, like toxicity or something. They had some other deeper violence in their soul that they had to get out, and they used straight edge as a form, as a trigger for that, a way to release this toxin from what their problems were. But having said that, and of course that's what the media sees. That's violence is always what is talked about, and it's much easier to talk about a fight than an interesting conversation. And and that's the truth. Even when you talk about punk rock, like you asked me, we were talking about it earlier about the violence. I go, yeah, there was all this hardship. Yes, there was violence. It was like, the touring was hard, and you were abused by like the venues and blah 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 blah. And yes, it was difficult. So if it was that difficult, are we a bunch of fucking morons to subject ourselves to that? No, we were fucking construction workers. We were making something that meant something, and part of that process means you have to contend with adversity. So that's what it was about. Like, this shit was real for us, and so we put up with that stuff. It didn't mean that it wasn't that, like anybody who's like, you go to a show and people fight, like why would you go there? It was because the music and the scene was that important to us. That's why. So something like straight edge, though the violence and the kind of gang-ish aspects of it have been talked about, really, the real, what I see straight edge, I think that the vast majority, 98% of the people identify as or with straight edge are just people trying to do the right thing in their own lives or for the world. And I think that's okay by me. If they want to call it a movement, that's fine. Just don't be telling other people what to do.
Yeah. What influenced Waiting Room?
The song?
Yeah.
Oh, I just think when I was going through that period of time where I was just playing music and not being a band, I was looking at all these other people around me. I was really frustrated, even before, leaving before Embrace, I was just frustrated because I saw everyone doing stuff and I just was stuck, and I thought, like, I'm just in the waiting room. I got it, like, everything else is happening, but then I thought, but then I realized, and the song says, but then I realized, patience. That's what, function is the key. It's got to be functional. So how do you be functional? You find people, in terms of a band, you find people that you want to play music with. That's how you form a band. Yeah. You don't put the band first and get some people. That's not functional.
Yeah.
If you're building a fucking car, the parts better work with each other.
Yeah.
Right? So function is the key.
So you weren't waiting for the doctor, is what you're saying.
No. Never.
Okay. Do you have any last words, Ian?
Thanks for your patience. I know you've been trying to do this for a while. I sure do appreciate you.
I have.
Your patience on it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for
And
your
you can
time.
send me a replacement copy of I had your magazine on my desk. I have it was on a pile of stuff to take down into my archives, and I had a really weird window flood. Like the top of the window flooded. It was a rainstorm and something, I don't know how. It's so weird, but water came to the top of the window, and I dried it out, but it's still pretty crinkly. So if you ever make any more copies of that one with Henry on the cover,
I'll send you a bunch for
I
sure.
just need one or two, just for the collection. Yeah, it's just going to the archives.
Thank you for your contribution to music and everything you've done.
Great to talk to you.
I appreciate it. Have a great day, Ian.
You as well. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.